Where are you located?
I am in Edmonton, Canada.
Oh, okay. Alberta.
Yes, Alberta. Yeah.
Alberta.
Home of the Oilers.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I think you're my third Canadian guest I've had.
Yeah, okay. Awesome.
Yeah. All right. So Edmonton. And so yeah, rare illness advocate survivor. You're an author. Spent 126 days in the hospital. Crazy
Yes, I
story.
did. Yeah, it's wild to think what I've gone through and especially where I am now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it happened and changed my life for the better, though.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely want to talk to you about that. And just man, I do want to ask you some random questions. So
Sure.
some fun random questions to get this started. Your go-to holiday movie?
Home Alone for sure.
Home Alone one or two?
First one.
Okay. Yeah.
Classic.
Exactly. I My daughter and I can quote both of those like verbatim. Uh you got a ticket for two. You can go anywhere in the world with those tickets. One is a returning place you've been, another is somewhere you've never been before. Where do you go?
I would go to Jamaica actually. I loved it there.
Okay.
I've been there before, and that place I've never been would be Australia for sure.
Top of my list too.
Yeah.
Where at in Australia?
Anywhere. I am
Okay.
fine with
Just to be
wherever.
there.
Just to be there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I find their people and their culture is very similar to Canada. So
Yeah. Okay. Uh Biggest fear you have?
biggest fear. Oh, dying without reaching all my goals.
Okay. I think you've probably answered something I was going to ask you a little bit later. Um, well, the next question was going to be uh more than anything before you die, you want to be blank. And I think yours would be reaching all your goals. Um,
Absolutely.
so you have dinner for three with three historical figures. No longer with us. Who would you dine
No
with?
longer with us. Let's say Tupac,
That's a good one.
Princess Diana, and maybe Kurt Cobain.
It's about as diverse a group as you can get.
Yeah, yeah.
What? Give me one thing they have in common, and you win.
Oh, well,
Um,
I mean, I would just say that they're all inspirational in their own way.
that's true. Okay. All right. So, what was childhood like for you growing up?
I had a wonderful childhood. Nothing like some of the guests that you've had in the past, but I was born and raised here in the Edmonton area and another small town not too far away. My parents divorced when I was about 3 years old, but they were very close, and I had two older brothers, and we had a really happy childhood.
Yeah.
They wanted to make sure that we knew that they loved us and that being separated wasn't going to change anything. And so they made sure that we stayed very connected. We went to my dad's every second weekend, and then we went back to my mom's during the week. And we traveled a lot together. We had Christmas holidays together. And yeah, I just had a really, really supportive family
Yeah.
that I always kind of knew that whatever I wanted to go after in life, I would always have their support, which
Yeah.
I think has really made me who I am today.
And that's good to hear that too, because a lot of times those stories go complete opposite, and it was brutal with one parent or the other. But yeah, hearing that's super good to hear. What were some of your aspirations as a kid?
My aspirations, they weren't so much career oriented. I knew I wanted to be a mother. So when I was like 3 years old, I'm playing with Barbies and dolls and I'm picking them up. And I just knew deep in my heart that I was destined to be a mother. So my
Yeah.
goals really were to like, you know what? I'm going to grow up. I'm going to find me a man and I'm going to get married and we're going to have babies and we're just going to live happily ever after. And it was just really the family life. And maybe it's because I grew up with divorced parents that I wanted to
Mm,
recreate what I felt that they had failed at. And so I just really wanted to just have a family and be a mom. And I'll be honest, it was a daughter that I wanted, and I did. That's what I got.
yeah.
But it was just that motherly daughterly bond that I really craved for one day. Probably because I grew up with brothers.
Yeah. I'm curious to ask you this because a lot of times we have like those turning points in life where something happens, such as what happened to you when I believe you were 26 years old. But up until then, like for me, it's like you really didn't start, I didn't start living life with purpose until I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s. If looking back for those first 25 years, what do you think it was that really defined you up until you were diagnosed with GBS?
To be honest, I don't think that there was anything. Like you, I really did struggle with purpose. My mom was a inspirational speaker. She was
Hmm.
very outgoing. She was very just charismatic, and I was kind of the shy, quiet one. And I didn't really know what my purpose was in
Yeah.
life. And I went back to school to get into human resources, but it was never like a huge passion of mine. To be honest, I was kind of lost in my 20s. It was just like, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what life is going to be like. I don't know what my purpose is. And I do find that after going through what I did, completely changed my life and gave me that purpose.
And you and your husband found out y'all were gonna have a child. And where'd you meet your husband at?
So this is my then husband. We're actually divorced now.
Okay.
I met him through friends, and we met when we were 18, and we got married not for quite a while. Got married when we were about 25.
Wow, that's a long time.
So just shortly before I went through my experience with GBS and got pregnant about a year and a half after we got married, and everything was going exactly like I had planned it as a child, right? I've
Yeah.
got the husband, I got the family, and life was just so perfect. And then it just kind of all came crashing down when I was 26.
Yeah. And just for the listeners, who are tuning in this episode or are unfamiliar with it, uh, do you mind educating them on what GBS is?
Absolutely, yeah. So GBS is it's a rare autoimmune disorder. It's very similar to multiple sclerosis. And the way
Mhm.
it's different is that with MS, it basically is an autoimmune disorder attacking the brain, whereas with GBS, it's attacking the peripheral nerves, which is all the nerves in your body that are not attached to the spinal cord or your brain. So it's basically every nerve
Pretty
in your
much
entire
damages the
body.
nerves, right?
It pretty much damages it. It basically blocks the ability for your brain to send signals to your nerves.
Okay.
And so what it does is it potentially can paralyze you, which in my case is what it did.
Yeah, and what from the Mayo Clinic doing my research for this, one out of 100,000 people suffer from GBS each year. And uh, when did you see kind of the onset of symptoms of it? Do you remember, like,
I, I
hindsight, that first moment?
Hindsight, I do. Yeah, it took me about 6 months after I'd recovered from GBS to realize what that pinpoint was. But I was at home, and this would have been about 3.5 weeks after giving birth to my daughter.
Hmm.
So we were recovering at home. I had a C-section. Baby was completely healthy, and I was doing well. But we hadn't left the house at all because it was minus 30 where I was
Okay.
from. And yeah, we were just a lot adjusting to life, being a new mom and being parents and getting used to waking up in the middle of the night and breastfeeding and all that. And all of a sudden I had this weird tingle in my finger, and this was kind of in the middle of the day. And I thought maybe I'd burnt myself because it was kind of numb. And so like you said, hindsight now, I do know that that was because the nerve damage was starting right there
Yeah.
in my fingertip. But I forgot about it, was thinking, I don't know what I burned myself with. It's not a big deal. I'm sure it'll be fine in an hour or so. And then a couple hours later, I had this pain in my neck, and it came on quite suddenly. I thought maybe I had turned my neck the wrong way, and it was just quite severe. And I'm thinking, well, maybe did I pinch a nerve or something? And kind of just try to ignore it. I took some so yeah, I'd taken some Advil, and the pain just continued to get worse. And I'm wondering, okay, what's wrong with me? I go on Google, as you do when you're
Of
trying to
course.
figure out what's wrong with you. And the first thing I see is you probably have a pinched nerve. So, and that's what I had thought. And so I'm like, yeah, you know what? I've got this weird tingling in my finger actually now that I remember, and this pain in my neck, and I'm having a little bit of trouble walking up the stairs. So I assume that that's what it is. Just try to brush it off as the next like 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes go by. The pain is getting worse, and I'm trying to ignore it. I got to put my daughter to bed. So I put her to bed in her crib. And I'm like, I need to get a good night's sleep. Just, I'm in so much pain, but I just think I need a good night's sleep. So I go to bed. I'm laying there trying to sleep. It's not helping. The pain medication's not helping. I get out of bed and I'm laying on the floor trying to stretch, trying to do all these different stretches. I'm Googling yoga poses and neck stretches and all this stuff, and
Yeah.
nothing is helping. And I'm like, okay, well, is this a pinched nerve? Like, did I break a bone in my neck or do something to my neck because it's severely painful? And the hours go by, and at about 3 in the morning, my daughter wakes up because she was nursing, and so she's crying, and she's 3 weeks old. And I went to get up, and when I stood up from the floor, my knees completely buckled, and I fell to the ground.
Mm.
And I was able to stand back up and lock my knees in place and hold myself up, and I'm like, my legs are just so weak. I think I need to go to the hospital. This pinched nerve that I have is obviously quite severe, that it's affecting my ability to walk. So I had my then husband at the time, drop me off at the hospital because I didn't want my newborn coming to the ICU, or sorry, coming to the ER. So I had him drop me off, and I said, just call me in a couple hours, or I'll call you in a couple hours. And I had no idea that when I walked through that door, that would actually be the last time that I would set
Oh my
foot
God.
outside for almost 3 months.
Oh my gosh. You probably just thought it was gonna be routine in and out.
I literally thought I would just go in and see a doctor, and whatever was wrong, they would give me some medication, and then I would be on my way, and I'd be home in 3 or 4 hours.
Wow. And what happened when you got in there? Because I've been in a similar situation, not to where I was paralyzed, but I went in for something that I thought was, um, I was like, wow, my arm is swelling, and I'm just gonna go. I even told my wife, I was like, my phone's dying, but I'll be home in 2 hours. And I got admitted for muscle enzyme count. And when I got there, I
Oh,
was shocked, and they sent me back and started pumping fluids into me for a couple of days. But
well,
when you got there, what exactly happened? You got seen, and then when did they break it
yeah.
to you that you were diagnosed with GBS?
Yeah, so I got seen immediately by a doctor, and he said, "Yeah, you're quite weak. You've got weakness in your hands as well," which I didn't even realize.
Hmm.
And he said, "I have no idea what's wrong with you," which was very shocking to me to
Yeah,
hear a doctor say that because I thought doctors knew everything.
yeah.
And so he said, I'll be honest, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to call a neurologist, come down and see you. So just be patient. I mean, I waited in the chair, half asleep. They gave me some pain medication, which took away the pain completely. And when I woke up about 3 hours later, when the neurologist finally was able to see me, he brought me over to a bed, and I was having trouble walking a little bit as well then. But the pain was completely gone because of the
Mhm.
morphine that I'd taken. And I felt almost embarrassed that I was there because I
Yeah.
was like, you know what, I should probably just go home. Like, it's just a little bit of weakness in my legs. And he said, I think I know what this is. I think you have something called Guillain-Barré syndrome. And I remember going, I don't even know what that is. I couldn't even pronounce it.
I was like, you pronounced it better than I was trying to.
It took me about 6 months to learn how to pronounce it properly.
Yeah.
And I said, a syndrome, like, what is that? Like, is that a disease? Like, I had no idea. And I'm in my 20s, and I'm just so naive, and I'm thinking, okay, so now what? Like, you give me some medication and I'm gonna go home.
Hmm.
And he says, no, GBS, it's very serious, and it can be quite severe depending on how your case goes. We need to monitor you, and we need to admit you to the hospital. So I'm thinking, well, I'm a mom. I'm a new mom. My daughter's at home, and I need to breastfeed her, and I need to get back to her. And he's like, this is an emergency, and you need to get your family to come here. So that was it's very scary to hear.
Yeah.
And he starts me immediately on the treatment for GBS, which is basically something called IVIG, but it's like a blood transfusion essentially, and they're basically replacing my blood with donor blood with hopes that the antibodies in their blood will replace the antibodies in my blood and stop attacking the
Okay.
nerves.
They do a plasma
Unfortunately,
exchange too, right?
they do. So I had that
Yeah.
as well shortly
Okay.
after. Yeah, and we're hopeful, and they're telling us, you know what, we're just going to monitor you, and we're going to see how you do, and hopefully that your strength is going to start improving, and then you'll be able to get out of here. And so we're thinking that's how it's going to go, and I'm going to be fine. And but they're also warning us, this could get really bad, and you could end up completely paralyzed, and you could end up in the hospital for a long time. And I'm like, no, that's not going to happen to me. I'm completely healthy. I've never had any health issues my entire life. I think I've only gone to the hospital maybe once or twice for a bad migraine, and that's not going to be me. And I'm going to get out of here soon. And unfortunately, everything just snowballed, and all of a sudden, my legs were completely paralyzed, and then my arms were paralyzed, and everything was tingling, and like that tiny little tingle I felt in my
Yeah.
finger was magnified times a million in
How long
every
did that
part of
take
my
for
body.
that to go into effect? Like for you to feel just full paralysis?
So the full paralysis, it eventually rose up past my chest, through my lungs and affected my breathing. And I was rushed to ICU within 72 hours of that first symptom.
Do,
So
do you remember
very,
your
very
mindset at
quickly.
that time?
I do. And it's crazy that I do. Like I was obviously on so many medications, but I remember just being terrified,
Yeah.
just having no idea what the heck was happening. And I remember everything. And I remember them, my family showing up at the hospital. I remember them putting my daughter beside me and resuming breastfeeding. And then I remember them prying her from my arms and saying, "You can't breastfeed. You're on way too many medications. You have to stop." And I remember just crying and being so devastated. And then I remember them rushing me to ICU to be intubated. That's when they decided actually to give me plasmapheresis, the
Mm.
plasma treatment. And they didn't know, and I didn't know that I had really tiny veins. And when they were trying to insert the catheter into
Ah,
my artery, they actually ruptured it. So
ah,
I almost died, and I had to go to emergency surgery and had a blood transfusion. It took about 6 hours. My family was told they're not sure if I would survive. Of course, obviously I did. I woke up in ICU with a breathing tube down my mouth, in my throat, couldn't talk, could no longer move anything. And I felt like my life was truly over. I felt like I was dying. Everybody was around me in ICU, my family members, my aunts and uncles, my grandpas and my grandma and my friends, and everybody's there. And I'm just like, you just got to let me go, you guys. It's okay. It's okay. And the doctors are saying, no, you're going to get better. You're going to recover from this. You just have to get through this initial phase. But slowly over time, that's what happens with GBS is during the acute phase, that's when it's doing all the attacking. And then once it's done attacking, then gradually the nerves actually repair themselves and slowly you'll regain function and you'll have to learn how to do things again. But this all just seemed so far out there. Like I'm paralyzed. I can't breathe on my own. I'm struggling for every breath. My family's there, my daughter's there, she's a newborn, and I'm just so hurt and so angry at the world that this is happening to me in my 20s. And it was so hard for me to believe that I was going to get better, even though they kept telling me, and the nurses were so amazing and they were there fighting for me, and my family was fighting for me. But there were so many times that I just truly did not believe that I was ever going to make it out of there.
gosh. And do you recall like look Casey's your daughter's name, right?
Yes, yeah.
Do you remember seeing Casey and not being able to, because I've seen the video where they've got her kind of sitting there, and I encourage anyone listening to this to go watch that video that kind of walks you through everything that you're going through. Do you remember just looking at her and seeing her when you were in that paralyzed state?
I do, absolutely. For the first about 10 days that I was hospitalized, I was very sedated and obviously because I was in a lot of pain. So they were trying to
Yeah.
just keep me sedated and asleep as often as possible. I think it was about 10 days in that I recall being like, where is my baby? And then I looked and she was on the bed with me. And I was like having flashbacks of her being there with me. And I was like, I hadn't even noticed and I hadn't even looked at her. And I felt awful. I felt guilty that I hadn't paid attention to her. But then as after that, after the 10 days or so, the medication was lowered. And so I was much more coherent. And I do remember almost everything from the hospital.
Yeah.
And I think in one way it was amazing that my daughter was there with me and she was a huge motivation because I
Yeah.
wanted to get back to her one day. But at the same time, it was very difficult because they're placing her on my chest and they're saying, come see your mommy. And it was very heartbreaking for me to see my family members caring for her and holding her there in their arms. And she's crying and they're rocking her and they're giving her a
Yeah.
bottle and they're changing her diaper. So I felt very worthless for a very long time. I spent almost 3 months paralyzed in ICU, watching her grow up, watching her change. As you know, babies change very quickly in the
Oh my God.
first
Three
three
months is
months.
huge.
Yeah, and it was just such a dark time because I just truly didn't believe that I was ever going to get out of there. And I didn't think that I was ever going to get back to being the mom that I wanted to be. And I just was very angry and very, very depressed for a very long time, just feeling robbed of my future life and that all the things that I had looked forward to in my life, being able to just do things with my daughter, they were
Yeah.
gone, and we never got to experience those. We hadn't even barely left our house together.
Gosh. And you eventually, started to turn the corner. You were able to move your extremities. Before that, because that's obviously a huge sign of hope. Did you have that outside of your daughter, that glimmer of hope, of that positive mindset of, you know what, I'm going to push through this. I'm going to get through it.
A few times, I had pictures on my wall, and I
You
would
had
look at.
stars too.
I had stars above my bed that
Yeah.
anytime that anything improved, so even when my heart rate was much more manageable or my blood pressure wasn't skyrocketing, my parents would write it on a star and put it above my bed. So
Oh, that's
I
cool.
would look, I would look at the stars, and definitely that was okay. You know what? I just have to keep going, and I just have to see if I can reach more stars. And then the pictures on my wall and seeing my life and seeing who I was, and there was so many pictures of me and my friends and my family, and not just of my daughter. And it was a reminder that, you know what, I'm so much more than just a mom, and I have so much to get back to, and I have a life, and I'm me,
Yeah.
and I need to get back to my life, not only for her but also for me.
What was it?
Uh, Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just going to say that the a huge turning point for me was I was feeling so lost and so broken, and the doctors are saying you're going to get better, you're going to get better, and they're seeing the hopelessness in my eyes, and I'm not believing it. They're saying you have this very rare illness that we've never seen before, or some of the doctors had only ever seen a case once or twice, and so I felt like I was one of one of 7 billion.
Yeah.
I felt like I was the only person in the world with disease. Later, I learned that there was this whole community of people, but at the time, I felt so alone and felt like nobody knew what was going on and nobody knew how to treat me because they said that I was going to get better, but I wasn't. So the doctors actually had this idea that they had another GBS patient years before and he had recovered. And so they brought him in to the hospital to meet me.
Oh,
And so
nice.
he walked into the hospital completely recovered. He, crazy enough, had actually been in the exact same ICU room that I was in about 3 years prior. And he was a dad. He had 3 kids. And at the time of his diagnosis, he had 2 little girls. And they were quite young, like I think 6 months old. And so he was showing me pictures of him in the hospital and with his baby. And he's like, I recovered from this. I was where you were, and I recovered. And so that was a huge turning point for me because it was like, okay, so I'm not the only one in the world with this. And not only did this guy have it, he also recovered. And he walked into the room looking completely healthy, completely normal, as if he was never here.
Yeah.
And that gave me inspiration to keep fighting and keep going.
Do you remember that moment where you first you were able to move your extremities on your own, and what was going through your mind?
I do. So the first time I was able to move was my fingertip. So it's funny how that was where the first
Yeah.
sensation started. That was the first symptom, and then that's where it came back. So I was able to just barely move my fingertip. And I'll be honest, my family was ecstatic. The doctors were ecstatic. They said, "This is a sign that you're getting better." But for me, it was like I can't do anything with a fingertip move.
Yeah.
That to me, that's not a big deal. But it truly was. And I learned over time to really celebrate every tiny milestone. So I started moving my fingertip, and then I could flop my hands, and then I could move my wrists, and then my neck started moving, and I could move my head. And just slowly, it just started getting better, and the paralysis very, very slowly started to fade. And it was a turning point when I was able to cock my hand against the bottle and feed her
Yeah.
and feed my baby again.
I think some of the milestones that I saw watching that video, you day 70, and correct me if I'm wrong, any of these, you got moved out of ICU. 87, you stood up for the first time. How was that? Finally getting out of the bed on your own and standing up.
Getting out of ICU was the most important thing, just because I was on a ventilator, obviously, for so long. So, like you said, it was 70 days before I got off the ventilator. And prior to that, I was struggling to breathe, and they told me that I actually had to be able to breathe for 72 hours before I would get off the ventilator.
Okay.
And that was just so scary to me because every moment that I was trying to breathe was such a struggle. And every time that I tried to practice without the ventilator, I would feel like I was never going to be able to do it.
Mm.
And so I think I lasted 30 seconds and then like a minute and then 2 minutes. And every time I would be left hyperventilating and crying and going, I'm never going to be able to do this. But I did get better, and slowly over weeks, I was able to wean off the ventilator. It took probably 2 to 3 weeks before of practicing. And once I had done that, that was a turning point as well for me to be able to say that, you know what, I just accomplished something that I felt was impossible. So at the time, I had told myself, I'm never going to be able to do this. I can't do this. I'm not strong. I can't overcome this. And then I did, because I promised myself that I would
Right.
try every day. And I said, I'm going to just keep going. And eventually I did, and I got out of ICU. And from that point on, I knew that I could overcome anything. If I can overcome breathing, then I could get through this. So from there, I went through physiotherapy. I learned how to hold things and drink from a cup and feed myself and brush my hair and brush my teeth and feed my daughter a bottle. And eventually I got to, like you said, day 84, where I was able to stand for this first time. And I still didn't have a lot of feeling in my body. So it was very strange to stand beside that hospital bed, but not even feel my legs still at that point.
Yeah.
But it was so empowering. And it was like, you know what, if I can do this, I just have to keep going and I just have to keep trying. And eventually I was moved to a rehab hospital where I kept continuing to strengthen my arms and my legs. And that's where I was learned to walk again. And first started with a walker, so I got around using a walker for quite a while, and then eventually progressed to a cane. I went home after 126 days in the hospital. At that time, I was still using a walker to get around, but I was able to go home and be with my daughter. And by that point, my daughter would have been almost 6 months old.
Yeah. I thought you had her on what, the Bumbo chair.
I
Those
did,
those things
yeah.
are amazing, by the way.
Yeah,
But
it was wonderful. That's how we kind of got around the house, because I was
yeah.
still quite weak at the time. I wasn't able to pick her up. So that's how we kind of got around the house, was putting her on the bumble chair and then putting her on the seat of my walker.
And isn't it crazy how, looking back at your journey and everything that you endured, in those days, the little things that we take for granted, brushing our teeth, for you, brushing your hair, um, but walking, breathing, eating, drinking. I mean, this is stuff that we just take for granted. Did that change what you value, what you appreciate in life? And I mean, if so, like how? Do you catch yourself every now and then just going like, wow, I've taken this for granted at one point.
100%, yeah. After, like, during recovery, there was still a lot of fear about whether I would recover completely and whether or not I would be able to walk again. With GBS, there are some people that don't recover completely and are left paralyzed. So about 20 to 30% of GBS patients are left using a walker or in a
Yeah.
wheelchair or some sort of walking aid. So there was always that fear in the back of my mind that would I recover well enough to be able to walk again? No, I did. And of course, I had this huge gratitude for that. I would also spent a lot of time on a spinal cord injury ward where there were a lot of patients that had injuries that they would never walk again. They were in wheelchairs for the rest of their life. And so for me, knowing that I had that ability to use my body, and I had the ability to do physiotherapy and do exercise in ways that they would never be able to do. It just pushed me farther. So I was so grateful that I could be a mom and be at home and take care of her. I mean, I was changing her diaper and I remember crying the first time and thinking like, this is something so simple that people don't even realize that this is such a blessing that I have the coordination in my hands now that I can change a diaper
Yeah.
and to be able to breathe. And I started physiotherapy outpatient as well, because I was still quite weak and walking for long distances were hard. Walking up the stairs was still challenging. Struggles with opening jars and keeping my arms up in the air for a long time to reach out and touch my daughter. And so I knew that my therapy really was on me, and I knew that if I wanted to continue to get stronger, that I had to put in the work, and that if I didn't do anything, that I would just kind of stay where I was. And I knew from overcoming breathing on my own that I was capable of it. I
Yeah.
knew that, you know what, we are so much stronger than we realize. When we're in these really hard moments in our life, we think that there's no way we can get through them. But then when we do, then it's just we realize just how strong and powerful we really are. And so I stopped setting limitations on myself. I said, you know what, I'm going to get into yoga. I'm going to do the insanity program. I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to start running. And it was so challenging at first. And whenever I did any kind of new exercise, it was painful and it was hard.
Yeah.
But I just said, you know what, I'm just going to keep trying. And I just kept trying. And over time, it got a little bit easier. I got a little bit faster. I got a little bit stronger. And
You're getting at it with
eventually,
that insanity. Yeah.
yeah, and eventually I recovered completely. And not only that, I got into the best shape of my life and
Yeah.
got into strength training and started running all the time.
Wow. And how did it, what does it mean to you knowing that when you were in the hospital, one of those signs of hope was somebody that walked through the door who had been through something similar to you? And now you've kind of come full circle with that, where you're actually being that person for others who are going through GBS. What does that mean?
Even when I was in ICU, I remember thinking, how do people not know about this disease? It's
Yeah.
it's so awful that it could just literally change my life in 72 hours and just completely ruin everything. And I was just shocked that I had never heard of it before and that no one else had heard of it. And I said, I need to bring awareness. And I remember, like, I'm heavily medicated and I'm thinking in my head, when I get out of here, I need to educate people and I need to bring awareness to this
Yeah.
awful disorder. And so when I recovered, I had people coming to me and asking me what it was like to go through GBS and what it was like to be hospitalized. And I immediately started writing a book at that time. And I put out my YouTube videos of my time in the hospital because I just wanted to show other people that may be in the hospital or show family members that, you know what, I also felt like I was never going to recover. And that's what I believed for a very long time. But I did. And here I am stronger than ever. And so I wanted to show other people that. And so I put out my YouTube video and it ended up going viral. And all of a sudden I had people from all over the world reaching out to me. There was GBS survivors from 30 years ago that said, I've never met another person with GBS
Wow.
before. And there was people saying, I didn't recover completely, but you've given me hope and I'm going to try. I'm going to get into exercise now because I see you doing it.
Yeah.
And people saying, I have a family member in ICU right now, and we didn't believe that they were going to get better. And we had no hope and they had no hope. But now seeing your story, we do, and we're gonna keep fighting for them. And it changed my life. And like we talked about in the beginning, that was when I truly found my purpose.
Yeah. Oh, that's super cool. How has Casey asked you much about it, or does she like, because she's at that, what, 12 now?
Yeah, she's almost 12.
Probably super
It's
curious.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it. I've always talked about it since she was
Yeah.
born. So she's seen the videos. She's seen what we've gone through. She's seen many pictures. I've explained everything to her. So she, as much as like she doesn't remember anything, obviously, she still, I think, feels so connected to it and feels
Yeah.
like it's such a big part of her life. It's kind of funny because I do have a scar on my neck from where the tube was in my throat. And she always said, like when she went to kindergarten, she thought everybody had those little scars. So she was used to draw people with little red circles on their neck. But I'd honestly, I think that it's truly given this connection with her that I
Yeah.
don't think we would have had we not gone through it together. She was my guardian angel, and it was she brought in so much joy and laughter in
Yeah.
ICU because I mean she's doing all these funny things and she's doing all these cute little new things, and she just made us laugh, and she got us through such a difficult time. And if I had gone through that and wasn't a new mother, I just don't know if I would have fought as hard to get back to her.
Yeah. Even hearing y'all do the little tongue thing, communicating with each other.
Yes.
It's like, now knowing how it turned out, it's like, oh, but it had to be hard just to see that and to go through it. But what an inspiration for her. And then, what is it like now being a fitness trainer?
It is amazing. So I like got into strength training. I realized that we are so much stronger than we know, right? And
Yes.
when a lot of times people don't push themselves because it's the mental side. They think that, oh, I'm not strong enough to do this. And so I always just said, you know what, I'm just going to keep trying. And then I got into the best shape of my life, and I'm exercising at the gym like 4 or 5, 6 days a week. And people were coming to me and asking questions, and how did you do this? And I didn't feel educated enough to be able to tell them. And so I ended up getting certified and started working with clients. And I ended up actually working with many GBS survivors who have come to me now and said, can you train with me? And this was all during COVID. So it worked out wonderful because we were able to connect over Zoom and I was able to
Oh,
help
cool.
them out and just being able to help people, just be stronger when getting up and off the couch
Yeah.
and being able to walk for farther distances. And so, like you said, it's just really come full circle to know where I've been and to be able to help other people now.
How was that writing a book?
Writing a book. So I've been rewriting a book now. I originally put out my first book, Happily Ever After. It was about 1 year after I recovered, just because I really wanted to share with my family and friends what I had gone through. And then, of course, when everything changed and I put out my videos and everything went viral, that's when I started realizing that there was this huge community of GBS survivors around the world, and I started connecting with other people. I ended up getting involved with the GBS Foundation here in Canada. There's also one in the US as well. And we started fundraising and meeting people around the world and putting on conferences and going actually into the hospital and visiting patients. So I've gone into many ICUs and walked in and said, I've been where you have, and I've recovered as well. And so it just really just put me on this new path. And so much has happened in the 10 years since that I started rewriting the book and just doing an update on everything that happened since. And yeah, that book is going to come out in January. And I'm just so excited for everyone to read it and to just see that I went from basically rock bottom, from not being able to breathe and not being able to move anything in my body, and then to recover from that, and to not only recover, but to turn it into something good and to be where I am today, I think is just a really big inspiration, not only to myself, but to other people as well,
Yeah.
that even when you're in the depths of despair and you don't think you can get out of it, there is always hope.
If somebody wants to get a copy of the book, where do they go to?
So it'll be on Amazon, and then as well as my website, which is hollyaftergbs.com. And feel free to follow me anywhere. I'm on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and I connect with people all over the world.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely have that in the notes for this. Uh, what has shifted for you most internally looking back on that whole experience that you went through?
I think that just life is so short. In my 20s, I believed that I would never get sick until I was 85. That's
Yeah.
kind of that's the idea, right?
Yeah.
And so then suddenly I was very sick, given this second chance at life. And so it's taught me to really go after my goals and go and do things that I've always wanted to do. I've started traveling much more. I think that there was always all these places that I would have loved to go to, but never did. And now I try to do that, and I try to travel more, and I'm more adventurous as well. I've done a lot of mountain climbing and zip lining and a lot of fun activities that I don't know if I would have done
Yeah.
because of the fear and all of everything. But now it's just, you know what, life's too short.
Where outside of Australia? Where in North America is like your next place you want to travel to?
In North America,
Yeah.
um, I've been to quite a few places in the States. Um, let's say even just LA would be amazing to go to. I've never been.
LA's nice. Traffic, I would oof. If you don't like traffic, geez. We were at Anaheim, which is like 20 minutes from it.
Yep.
And I went and asked at the front desk, I was like, hey, because we were at Disneyland. I said, how far is it to LA? And this was like 2010. I think this was like 2010. And they were like, oh yeah, it's 15, 20 miles up the highway, but it takes you about 3 hours. And I'm like,
That's what I hear.
whatever. And we got on the highway, and for the first 10 minutes, I'm just booking it. And I'm like, this is not bad. When I first saw the Hollywood sign, we were stuck in traffic. And I
Oh
was
my
like, oh,
goodness.
there's a Hollywood sign right there. But I will say Canada, I went to Canada as when I graduated high school. My mom asked me where I wanted to go. She's like, I'll take you anywhere in the States. And I said, all right, we'll go to New York, and I want to go to Canada. So
Yep.
we went to Toronto. I fell in love with it. I said, if I ever lived anywhere outside of the US, Toronto would probably be my go-to place because I
Yep.
just really fell in love with it at the time. But I loved Canada, and my wife, I'm like dying to get her back up there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful country.
And everybody's so
I,
nice.
yeah, everybody is.
Yeah, everybody's so nice there. Um, Let me ask you this. What is next for you after the book is released? Like, what's the next to do thing on your list?
So the book will come out. I'm going to be doing an audiobook. That's the immediate near future. I'm going to narrate it myself because I think that
That's the
readers
best
really
ones.
want to, yeah, they really want to hear it and what from my perspective. And then from there, I just want to do a lot more speaking and just sharing my story and just reminding others of always to keep that hope. I also want to get more involved. I'm actually now the vice president on the GBS board of directors with the foundation. And so just bringing more awareness, doing more raising of money and putting on campaigns and awareness events and educating doctors and going into hospitals and going into ICU and not only seeing patients, but speaking with medical professionals that deal with these disorders that many of them have never had a case of GBS in their lives. And some of them may never have a case in their entire career, but when they do, there's so much that they don't know and that they don't realize. And so
Mhm.
just being able to speak with doctors and share it from my perspective. I mean, doctors, they study the diseases, but they truly don't know what it's like to go through it. And so I have a very unique perspective to share.
Yeah. I usually ask the legacy question at the end, but I'm going to rephrase it for you. So when Casey is sitting down talking to your great grandchildren one day about her mom, what is it you want her to say about you?
I would just want her to say that she is living proof that you can go from 0 to 100 and
Yeah.
that you can overcome the most awful things that you think you can't, but you can.
Yeah. I mean, what an inspiration. I mean, I told you before we started recording, I think that your story in general is exactly why this podcast is a thing, to get stories like this out there and have people hear it and understand that. I mean, like you said, you can be the lowest of lows, but if you put in that work and that fight, things always can turn a corner. So
Absolutely, yeah. And I try to really reiterate that because I have met people over the years that they don't have that fight in them, but sometimes you just need that inspiration from somebody else. And so that's what I try to do is just, you know what, you may not have that, but you try and find it in other people to get you moving.
there is a spark somewhere.
Yep, absolutely.
Got to be able to find it. Yeah, I can't thank you enough. In the episode description notes, there will be everything that can get y'all and basically get you a copy of the book. So definitely go check out the book and go support everything that she's talking about. GBS, do research on it. I mean, it's something that I started to do research on, and like you said, the similarities to MS. I have a family member who had MS, and it's crazy how much
Hmm.
they own. And everybody knows, most people know about MS,
Yep,
um, which is scary. So
yep, yep.
definitely take some time, throw it in the Google machine, check it out. But I want to thank you for taking time to do this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And giving me a platform to share my story and bring awareness to GBS.
Yeah, well, I can't thank you enough. And folks, that'll conclude this episode of the Shadows Podcast.